your kind participation in today's Swadhyay Chakra weekly forum dialogue. Today, we are nurturing this dialogue in terms of celebrating the living legacy of Professor André Béteille, who is a kind of source of inspiration for all of us who belong to sociology fraternity in particular and social science in general. On behalf of Wismaiden Center for Asian Blossoming, I extend a very warm welcome to Professor Surendra Munshi, who is a former professor of sociology from a very esteemed institution called Indian Institute of Management, Kolkata. I extend a very warm welcome to Professor Anand Kumar Giri, Professor Mohanty, Purnimaji, Professor Gyan Glui, and all friends who are present here. Let me give a brief introduction to Professor Surendra Munshi, who is a deep seeker, a very unique kind of sociologist, has a deep interest in Indian sociology, and he was also fellow at Bertelsmann Stiftung, Germany, and he has a very vast area of interest, which includes classical sociological theory, sociology of culture, industrial sociology, and he has a kind of unique orientation, particularly when we see his work towards good governance, organizational behavior. He has written a deep scholarly article, which includes various topics such as democratic theory, issues related to globalization, and so on and so forth. He has a very two good articles on the work of sociologist Max Weber and his engagement in Indian sociology. Now I request Professor Anand Kumar Giri to give a kind of brief background of today's lecture, which is centered on life and sadhana of Professor André Béteille. Today is his birthday. So we are nurturing this dialogue. Yes.
Thank you so much, Randeep. Thank you, Professor Surendra Munshi, who has kindly accepted our invitation to present the first André Béteille annual lecture of Wismaiden. And this is to be with Professor Béteille on his 90th birthday. So, Randeep, I want to share a screen. Can you please enable me to share a screen, please? Hello, Randeep.
Yes. Now you can share your screen.
So, can you see the screen, please? So, we are with our Wismaiden Center for Asian Blossoming, which is an initiative and a movement of thinking across, being across. So we are nurturing our Wismaiden annual André Béteille lecture, and this is our first lecture. And as a prelude, as Professor Munshi is gifting us his lecture entitled Revisiting André Béteille, I beg your consideration to share a few thoughts as a prelude, tentatively entitled André Béteille at 90, Walking and Meditating with André Béteille, and New Pathways of Critique, Creativity, and Transformations. And in this, I would provide a little bit glimpse of many works of Professor Béteille, beginning with this, when he writes about Indian intellectual cultures, he writes, Indian intellectuals may boast, if they are so inclined, of being heirs to the most elitist among the ancient intellectual traditions of the world. Learning was for the chosen few, the rest had little or no access to it. Virtuosity was promoted among everything else, and an aura of mystery was created even around self evident truth. It would appear that even today, the Western educated Indian intellectual remains elitist at heart, although he has learned to speak populist tongue. Elitism and populism have both been influenced, at least in the outwards form they have taken, by the Indian intellectuals' exposure to the West, and indeed it is clear that in many cases there are two sides of the same coin. But it would be sad lesson to draw if we are to put the blame for this solely on the West, beguiling ourselves with cliches like neocolonialism, academic imperialism, and other such resonant phrases. These two paragraphs, they also provide a window into many-sided works of Professor Béteille, of course, beginning with his empirical work, Caste, Class, and Power, which also had a deep theoretical straw, as Béteille writes. He concludes his field-based reflection, Caste, Class, and Power. He says that it is an analytical exercise, but that analytical exercise also could be more experiential. And as Béteille himself says, that he has not been really a great lover of the field work. But moving on, I wanted to say that the whole sense of critique that Professor Béteille embodies, but in a very humorous, in a very inviting way, a critique that makes us to think rather than makes us alienated. Moving on, this paragraph of thought from his Ideologies and Intellectuals, he writes, ideologies by their very nature make use of concepts and symbols, which are ambiguous and rich in implicit meaning. The process by which these implicit meanings are made explicit is both complex and uncertain in its course. It is a process in which both the proponents of an ideology and their adversaries take part. An ideology addresses itself to the possibilities contained in the human condition and not merely to the existing conflict of interests. And that is very important because as empirical, as critical Professor Béteille is, Professor Béteille is not, insensitive to the possibilities of the human condition. Therefore, interpreting Professor Béteille like this collection of essays of Professor Béteille, entitled Anti-Utopia. Just think of the language, and this is edited by Professor Dipankar Gupta. But the very phrase itself, anti-utopia, of course, Professor Béteille is a critique of unreflective utopia. But that does not mean that Professor Béteille does not have a sense of utopic challenge, as he says that the normative possibilities in the human condition. And therefore, his conception of ideology as dialectic of value and power, though he himself is more to the power dimension, but he is not totally, absent to the possibilities in the dialectic, opening up new possibilities of both value and power. That brings us to, among many of his other works, is his book called Universities at the Crossroads, because as we are in a very difficult crisis today, the crisis of intellectual, crisis of educational institutions, this work is significant in which, like his critique of distributive justice, he is, and of course, that very important essay in 1990 called Distributive Justice and Institutional Well-being. Rapid expansion of universities in response to social and political pressure has led to a relaxation of academic standards in many, if not most of them. Then he goes on to provide this challenge And in a way, this has been at the core of Professor Béteille's journey, how to combine teaching and research in a way, in the most excellent way possible. Béteille writes, with the 21st century, we have entered the era of mass university. But the nostalgia for a different kind of university in which teaching and research are combined at the most advanced level in all significant branches of knowledge survive in the minds of many. We must see that this nostalgia does not become an impediment to the creation of more purposeful, though perhaps less ambitious institutions of teaching and research in the universities. Moving on, quickly, I also want to draw your kind attention to another aspect of Professor Béteille's work, his work in social theory, which involves a very creative kind of comparative engagement, beginning with his critique of Louis Dumont in his very important essay called Homo Hierarchicus and Homo Equalis. He critiques Dumont's construction of Indian society as hierarchical and West as equalis. His essay, Individualism and Equality, also it is in that trajectory. But regarding standpoint, and today this very issue of standpoint is very important as we are talking about Dalit standpoint, feminist standpoint, Béteille writes, there is no unique or privileged standpoint in the study of society and culture. Even within the same society, there is generally a plurality of standpoint, varying with religion, class, gender, or moral and intellectual predilection. Sociology and social anthropology cannot move forward unless plurality of standpoints is accepted as a fundamental condition for the systematic and comparative study of society and culture. But it is one thing to argue, to say that studying marriage from the standpoint of a woman or discrimination from that of a Dalit, and quite another to have standpoint itself defined by a particular agenda. And in the same genre, what Béteille writes in the context of his commitment to secularism and the challenge before Indian social scientists, this paragraph is deeply significant. The sociologist's obligation to be even-handed and value-neutral in the study of religion in a country like India, where different religions with different worldviews and ideologies coexist, are allowed and encouraged to grow and flourish. The comparative study of religions become difficult, where study of religious beliefs and practices become divided among sociologists according to their religious identities, so that Hinduism is studied only by Hindus, Islam only by Muslims, and Christianity only by Christians. And it is a self-reflective challenge for each one of us here to reflect upon our study of social categories, whether religion, caste, that how many non-Hindus, for example, have studied Hindu religion. And similarly, how many non-Dalits have studied Dalit communities doing field work there. And towards the end, I want to bring a little bit from his this point about his essay, Reproduction of Inequality, Occupation, Caste, and Family. Professor Munshi is going to also engage with his work on inequality. And here his engagement with both John Rawls and Ronald Dworkin is very significant. But his challenge in terms of what is the ground of perpetuation of inequality. And he's drawing us to the role of family. And here he writes, a dispassionate and critical examination of the middle class family and its role in the reproduction of inequality may turn out to be more disturbing than one might accept. For if the result of such an examination shows, as I believe it must, that the family is indeed the main obstacle to the advance of equality, what conclusions for policy can we then draw? Nothing is easier than to government and opposition together in parliament to denounce caste system and ask for its abolition? Who will denounce the Indian family and ask for that to be abolished? This is another kind of classic Béteille with humor and sense of critique. And of course, I myself have a critical engagement with this reflection, that how family itself also can be a nurturing ground of egalitarian practice, which I have explored in my other studies. Now, I want to conclude with his autobiographical reflection. And he has gifted us this autobiography called Sunlight on the Garden. How beautiful this title, Sunlight on the Garden. And to be with Professor Béteille in his age 90 and realizing that each one of us, we are walking in the sunlight on the garden. And he writes, my mother had a strongly Protestant streak in her character, and it may not be too fanciful to think that my father's Roman Catholic temperament found some kind of resonance in my grandmother's Hindu outlook on life. So if we read Professor Béteille's autobiographical reflection, my two grandmothers, what we find, and I think Professor Bina Das has reflected upon this, Professor Béteille's reflection of him as a child. And I think in this, at his age 90, we need to realize the very deep child within him that has enabled to remember his experience as a child, and how we, each one of us, we realize the child within ourselves to be able to walk and meditate with a seventh like André Béteille and contribute to the creation of what can be called as kingdom of knowledge. Immanuel Kant talked about kingdom of ants. Gandhi talks about Ramarajya. The biblical tradition talks about kingdom of God. But one way to reach this kingdom of knowledge, that each one of us to be a child, as Professor Béteille so beautifully describes in his autobiographical piece, which is a combination of literature, anthropology, and sociology, my two grandmothers. So thank you, and now we welcome Professor Surendra Munshi, please.
Thank you, Anand, and thank you for this presentation, brief presentation. I found it very interesting indeed. Now, I'm grateful, Anand, to you and to your colleagues, Randhir and Minati, for this invitation to deliver this first Vishwa Anidam André Béteille lecture today, of all days, on his 90th birthday. It's a very special occasion, and I'm indeed grateful for this kind invitation. This is, I think, his 90th birthday. As we observe it, this is the right time to revisit his writings, in my eyes. One has read his writings, one has heard him speak, but one has done it in a scattered fashion. As and when a piece came, one read it, but to read them all together and to assess for oneself, what is this scholar trying to tell us over these years of engagement with scholarly activities, is something very, very rewarding. I've tried, Anant, after your invitation, to revisit Max Weber, revisit André Béteille, and while I was doing it, I must say, I found this had to be a work in progress. It had to be a work in progress in the sense that one had to pursue it further. And what I'm going to present to you, all of you, is a work in progress. I'm working on it, and I hope and pray that I can put it all together in an article based on this lecture that I am going to present. For those who are interested in reading André Béteille, I would suggest that there could be no better introduction than the two articles that have been written, one by Dipankar Gupta and the other by Ramchandra Guha. Dipankar Gupta, you have mentioned, Anand, this book, Anti-Utopia, the introduction that Dipankar Gupta wrote to this collection. is something very useful. And Ramchandra Guha gave a chapter to Andre in his book Democrats and Dissenters, which came out in 2016. And that's a good chapter where he has reviewed André Béteille's principal writings. And Dipankar Gupta's Anti-Utopia, in addition, provides a good selection of many of the important writings of Professor Béteille at one place. And I think these are very useful sources to turn to. But for my present lecture, I have indeed gone to a totally different source. Professor Béteille gave a number of interviews, and from the period 1986 to 2005, roughly 20 years, he gave 4 interviews, and more recently, one more, among others. And some of them are available in a printed form, and some of them in an audio or video format. I found these interviews, which included one interview by me, I found these interviews very useful because turning to Andre's spoken words rather than his written words, as in his books and so on, has a quality of directness and engagement which is of value. And fortunately, when I read these interviews, 4+1, one recent one, I must say I was very pleasantly surprised that these 5 interviews, or principally these 4 interviews, allowing for some overlap, were very complementary in nature. They covered a much larger ground and were not just repetitions. So what I have done is to turn to these interviews to form an idea about André Béteille's scholarly journey. I begin this journey with a comment. Please allow me a comment in terms of my own personal contact with him. I have known him for several years. What started as a professional acquaintance turned into personal friendship. We met over several decades, actually, several times in Calcutta. When he came to visit Calcutta, first as chairman of Center for Studies of Social Sciences, and then as chairman of Northeastern Hill University. We met. He would always make it a point to let me know about his visit, and we met. Actually, we met also at Raj Bhavan, Calcutta, which was for me something very interesting because I'd never been to Raj Bhavan before. And this was because Gopal Krishna Gandhi, who was the governor of West Bengal at that time, was inviting Andre several times in connection with some work with which he had engaged him in his capacity as chancellor of Vishwabharati University. And I remember distinctly meeting André Béteille in Raj Bhavan. Later, when his visits to Calcutta became less frequent, I met him in New Delhi, and that was always something interesting. Professionally, we haven't done much. He wrote an endorsement for my book on good governance. That was 2004. I interviewed him in 2005. He attended a conference which I organized here in Calcutta on egoism and altruism in 1999. But as far as I recall, that was all by way of professional activity. But there was a lot going between him and me by way of personal meetings. And when we did meet, mostly in Calcutta, what did we do? We talked. And mostly we talked in Bengali, and with him calling me Soren and I calling him Andre, without Da. I should have done that. I should have called him André Da, as the normal practice with an older person here in Bengal. But I always addressed him as André, which was for some reason mutually acceptable. And we talked, André and I, and we talked about political events. We talked about people we knew. We talked about books and ideas. Politically, we met during the long period of left-run government here in Bengal, and also partly during the time of Mamata Banerjee's chief ministership. We talked about people we knew, Sukumai Chakrabarti, Surajit Sinha, Oshin Dashgupta, Ashok Rudra, and others, including Ramkrishna Mukherjee. And we also talked about people he knew, but I didn't know, prominently M.N. Srinivas and Nirmal Kumar Bose. I'd barely met M.N. Srinivas, and I had not met Nirmal Kumar Bose. This, I must say, and before I proceed, we also talked about books that we read, recent books that we had read. In short, I must say, when I look back, this was a proper adda. We would talk about this and that, everything in the world under the sun, and something I looked forward to. And I suppose the manner in which he took interest in letting me know about his visits and organizing it, something that perhaps he also liked. And in this connection, I must say that when we were meeting, Andre and I, at that time already I had published a critique of Nirmal Kumar Bose and Srinivas, a strong critique under the title of Tribal Absorption and Sanskritization in Hindu Society. Now, these are the two people he greatly values. But I must say, this did not have any impact, negative impact on our friendship, growing friendship. And actually, he talked to me about Nirmal Kumar Bose persuasively and made me see the positive side of Nirmal Kumar Bose, for which indeed I'm grateful to him. Now, with this small account of my personal acquaintance and friendship that I value, I wish to proceed now quickly to Andre's own personal life as we gather from his writings. And he, as we know, was born in India in a small town called Chandanagar near Calcutta. By the way, I lived also some years near Chandanagar when I was a young student, when my father worked in a company close to Chandanagar. So that was another thing that we shared. Andre had mixed parentage, as we know. His mother was Indian Bengali, and his father was French. Father was born in India. He was French speaking, though he spoke English and Bengali as well. Andre was exposed to two cultures. The Bengali culture at home. At home, he learned English. He learned Bengali, and later he learned English at school. And also, I must say, he had the other cultural influence most prominently in his parental grandmother, who was French and Pakka French Mem Sahib, and with whom Andre had an uneasy relationship, but still there was another influence in his life. He has, you have mentioned, talked about his two grandmothers in a very charming piece that all of us really must read to see how he was brought up in a household with very contrasting cultural background. Now, André Béteille has mentioned somewhere that this created in him an interest in studying divergences in human society, these contrasting cultures that he experienced as a young man, and also his interest in comparative method. Now, I would mention in this connection that this was not without its cost. Béteille was a Bengali in every sense of the term and was accepted in appearance, in his outlook, in his behavior, in his language, and so on. But his name, André Béteille, is certainly not a Bengali Hindu name. And this was something that was an issue because within his circle of school friends, it will always be an issue to explain why did he have such a strange name. Now, his father was very different. Even though he spoke Bengali and English, he spoke French, and he looked European, and more, as I said, his father's mother, who was extremely French. This created in Béteille several sensitivities. I can well imagine the extreme cultural divergence within his own family. It created this divergences, created with him certain sensibilities of which we must take note of. And I'll talk about this a little later, a little more. And there was another dimension to his family background. His father, who spoke Bengali, who had married a Bengali woman, and but who was French, was not aggressive, but still not entirely devoid of European background. And but his mother, Bengali mother, became over time, as the nationalist movement grew, quite nationalist in her expressions and aspirations, Gandhi, Nehru, and so on. And this created tensions within the family. The father's pull worked on Béteille in one respect. He became suspicious about exceedingly big claims about India's glorious past, but his mother pull worked by way of making him sensitive about the evils of colonial rule. Later, when he went to St. Xavier's College in Calcutta, this need to explain his name, why are you carrying such a strange name, became less compulsive because St. Xavier's College in Calcutta was more progressive and, let's say, more cosmopolitan. But what has to be understood is it created for him a certain attitude, which he has described as proximity and distance. He is a Bengali Bhadralok in every sense of the term, but yet this background created within him, which I didn't know when I met him as a person, but having read him, now I know that it created within him an attitude of proximity and distance, which got expressed or became clearer to him when he was doing his field work in Tanjore, a totally alien place, totally different place by way of language, culture, and everything else. And that was a time when he discovered in Tanjore certain practices which he had observed in his own mother, in his own grandmother, mother's side, among Tamil widows. Both these grandmothers, father's side and mother's sides, were widows. And he discovered certain practices in his mother's side, that were common in Tanjore, and which created in him a certain awareness that in spite of differences, there are certain similarities at work. Quickly going through his St. Xavier's College, he went to study, starting with physics, he went to anthropology and went to study anthropology in Department of Sociology in anthropology in Calcutta University. And he says these years in the Department of Anthropology in Calcutta University were happy years. He studied different subjects and made many friends outside his department and outside his field. Of them, he mentions prominently Sukumai Chakravarti, the economist, Oshin Dasgupta, the historian, among others. And he also talks at that point of how vibrant the culture of the coffee house on College Street was, and how most often students, young students, met in the coffee house in a very vibrant culture of that place, and how prominent, even as a student, Sukumai Chakravarti was, and how much he was respected, even by his teachers. Now, after he completed his master's or MSc in anthropology, he had the opportunity to go to Delhi, where M.N. Srinivas was building his department in Delhi School of Economics. And he got his job there as a lecturer and moved to Delhi. While he was teaching, he did his PhD. And the rest is, as they say, history, because he stayed on with Delhi School and Delhi forever. And we are aware of that. Now, I would quickly shift to his influences. N.K. Bose, Nirmal Kumar Bose, an anthropologist and someone who was active in the nationalist movement. Now, Béteille was greatly impressed by Nirmal Kumar Bose. He actually translated a Bengali book, A Structure of Hindu Society, into English, and also provided a very good introduction. He also wrote an obituary on Nirmal Kumar Bose when he passed away. Now, when Béteille talks of Nirmal Kumar Bose, and I have already mentioned that he talked to me about Nirmal Kumar Bose in a very engaging manner and made me see the side for which I am grateful of Nirmal Kumar Bose. When he sees him as a scholar, he sees his range, his commitment. He sees also what's important, that he could combine in a very effortless manner what has become popular under the terminology of Srinivas, textbook, book view, and field view. He could combine that, and even though he was not an obscurantist, he had great respect for India's intellectual tradition, and he expected that we would build upon it to create our discipline of anthropology or sociology, and something for which he was very keen. Now, the contrast between Bose and Srinivas is quite clear. Nirmal Kumar Bose had studied in India. He did not go abroad till he was in his 50s, though I must say when he did, he was greatly honored and was received in the best of circles in the United States. But unlike M.N. Srinivas, who studied abroad, he was a product, Nirmal Kumar Bose, of Calcutta. And now I shift to another influence of Béteille, M.N. Srinivas. This is widely known, and Béteille has also talked about it. Srinivas influenced him in many ways, and he was his PhD guide. And And one statement that Béteille quotes from or mentions in one of his interviews is that social life is untidy. Don't try to tidy it up too much. And now this created, as he says, a suspicion in his mind about theorists who make social life look more organized than it actually is. Srinivas's emphasis on fieldwork, Béteille sees as a departure, great departure in the mode of thinking in anthropology, but also in the mode of Indian intellectual tradition, which has not paid much attention, as Béteille observes, to observation and description. Srinivas would say, go and see. Go and see how it works rather than how it is supposed to work. And Srinivas, as we know, was a student of Radcliffe Brown, and at Oxford, Evans Pritchard. And through Srinivas, Béteille was exposed to their influence and so on. As far as Tanjore, choice of Tanjore is concerned, Srinivas left it a little open to him. He told Béteille, choose another community. Don't choose a Bengali-speaking community, because he came from a Bengali-speaking area, and learn a new language. They even thought of doing some study of Tamil speakers in a Delhi neighborhood, but somehow that idea was dropped, and Béteille went to Tanjore. Now, Béteille has time and again praised Srinivas, and there is no denying he had a very, very lasting influence on him. But there is also a comment he makes somewhere that Srinivas' Sanskritization was rather limited, because when it came to backward classes, their aspirations were not just Sanskritic emulation based, but also based on wider issues of economic participation and political participation. Now, this is quite obvious. What Béteille also observes is that when he went to Tanjore, now this is something that has to be noted. When he went to Tanjore, people have said that there was hardly any influence of Srinivas to be seen in Tanjore. There was hardly any talk of Sanskritization. There was hardly any talk of just caste and so on. But Béteille has himself said that he paid attention to social structure, which was what Srinivas had learned from his Oxford anthropology tradition, Radcliffe Brown, Evans Pritchard, Forbes, and Gluckman. And he did his fieldwork with the idea of social structure in mind. And that was the influence of Srinivas. And Béteille even now holds Srinivas's study of religion and social society among the Cooks as a landmark study, a study that I greatly, thoroughly criticized in my article on tribal absorption and Sanskritization and Hindu society. Now, Béteille also at times mentions certain defects, other defects of Srinivas, including that he was India bound and not very theoretically oriented. But these comments do not add up to a systematic critique of Srinivas. On the contrary, there is time and again assertion of his indebtedness, not only to Srinivas, but to Radcliffe Brown. In one of the interviews, I was quite amazed to see Béteille categorically saying, I see myself as a sociologist and a social anthropologist within Radcliffe Brown tradition. One name, Radcliffe Brown. And the question is, where did this influence come from? Obviously, it came from a very close disciple of Radcliffe Brown, Srinivas. I wish to now quickly touch upon yet another influence on Béteille, Durkheim. Now, Durkheim's influence on Béteille, I think, is somewhat indirect. It is through Radcliffe Brown. Now, Radcliffe Brown was influenced by Durkheim, and Srinivas was influenced by Radcliffe Brown, and so on. Now, Durkheim, what Radcliffe Brown, I think Durkheim, when we approach Durkheim, we have to understand we are approaching a very complex thinkers with multiple strands of thought at work. But what Radcliffe Brown took from Durkheim and what was of importance was that societies are governed by laws. We need to find these laws and through classification and arrive at generalizations and things of this kind. Now, this is a kind of structural view that I would say is part Durkheim, not perhaps the full Durkheim, but that's how it is. And now that yet another influence, Weber. Now, class status and power, caste status and power, it's a play, it seems, on Weber's famous article on this subject. And many people have commented that Béteille was greatly influenced by Weber. And he himself, in his interview with me, when I talked to him about this, he said both Weber and Durkheim gave a specific orientation to sociology, empirical, systematic, comparative, and Durkheim emphasized classification, Weber typification, and so on and so forth. Now, in this respect, I think there is perhaps more to the influence of Weber on Béteille than can be summed up in this manner. But it was very strange. Out of 5 interviews that I have studied now, Weber appeared only in my interview, not in any other interview, which was extremely surprising for me. I checked and rechecked. Has he mentioned Weber in any other interview? And it seems he didn't. But still, I would say the influence of Weber on him is not to be overlooked. But I would say, before Anand, I talked about the famous controversy. Now I would move on to debates and not influences. So before I move to the debates that he has engaged with, I would say that all of us know about his debate with Dumont. But not many of us realize that in a way, Béteille has been engaged in lifelong discussion, lifelong debate, if you like, with Marx and Marxists. And this is something that needs to be noted because you have to, he says it very clearly, that I am embattled with 2 kinds of theories, materialist interpretation of history, and the other, that ideas and beliefs are primary. Now, he says these 2, and if we, to anticipate his criticism of Dumont, if you recall his criticism of Dumont, one point that comes is interests play very little role in Dumont's presentation. And where does this come from? He has critical of Marx. It is holistic. It claims too much from a particular point of view, and so on and so forth. But we shouldn't forget that Béteille grew up in Calcutta. I talked about City Coffee House. I talked about his friends, and Sukumar Chakraborty actually most prominently. These were some of the finest minds in Calcutta at that time. And he says that my Marxist friends were forceful and subtle. What he didn't like about them was their certitude. But he does acknowledge that he learned from them. And in fact, he says, I carried my ambivalent attitude towards Marxism when I moved from Calcutta to Delhi. And not many people know that he taught a course on aspects of 20th century Marxism in Department of Sociology, Delhi School of Economics, when M.N. Srinivas was the head of the department. Now, but this does not mean that he accepted Marxism. Far from that. He does not accept because he rejected the utopian, what he calls the utopian claim of Marxism, and he had other problems with Marxism, namely that you cannot separate base and superstructure the manner which Marxism does, and so on. And moreover, he was not at all willing to submit to the judgment of a higher authority, and which Marxism imposed by way of party membership. And we have to remember that Stalin was still alive when Béteille was in his college, and therefore, not submitting to an authority carries a certain sense in that respect. Now, but having said it, it's rather intricate. Now think of this, apart from Sukumar Chakraborty, whom you read him and you realize in what esteem he held him. And in my conversations, I held Sukumar Chakraborty also in very high esteem. I knew him personally. He was one of the persons we discussed. And I think between Béteille and me, he was one of the persons who provided a link, because both of us respected him. It was complex. Think of another name, Ashok Rudro, a bright Marxist, whom also I happen to know from my Indian Statistical Institute days. Now, it will surprise many sociologists to learn that the entire thrust of intelligentsia and intellectuals that Béteille has talked about came from Ashok Rudro. Ashok Rudro talked about intelligentsia. Ashok Rudro gave the impulse to, and this is not by way of a comment from outside, but a comment that Béteille has himself made. And actually, he says that Rudro, I held him in high esteem. And in fact, he says that I hold him as an ideal because Rudro could write technical stuff, but he could also write popular stuff, both in English as well as in Bengali. And he said that this is what I thought was an ideal that was worthy of emulation. So this relationship with Marx and Marxists is something very significant. Now we come to another debate, Dumont. Now, we know this was one major polemic of Béteille's academic life, in which he made his case exceptionally strongly and sharply. Now, what were his arguments against Dumont? His arguments were that he was dividing societies as governed by values of individualism and equality, and others, holism and hierarchy. Now, he was overlooking the role of interests. He was overlooking it. He was overlooking also that within Indian society itself, if there was hierarchy, there was also commitment, present-day Indian society, to equality in the form of constitution and legal provisions. He has a more deeper argument against Dumont, that he is contrasting, he is seeing differences, whereas he is not seeing, he is not comparing, he is not saying similarity. And here, Béteille's argument is that Dumont is very different from Tocqueville. Tocqueville indeed talked about aristocrats and democracy, but when Tocqueville talks of aristocrats and democracy, he's talking in terms of movement from aristocracy to democracy, whereas from A to B, whereas with Dumont, these are two different compartments, hierarchy and equality. And this is where Béteille has spoken extremely sharply. The other problem that Béteille has with Dumont is about his book view and field view, namely that he took us back to very strong book view and took us away, or tried to took us away from field view, and ignored the role of interests in human society. Now, with this, and also somewhere he talks about Dumont's neglecting inequalities of the market, which he says have been pointed out by others. Now, I would quickly move on to his interests. Having talked about his influences, about his debates, I would quickly move on to his interests. And of course, the major interest is social stratification. That is something we know. He has committed his life of scholarship to that. And it all started, as we know, in Tanjore, where he went for his fieldwork. It was something that he had not anticipated that it would happen in this manner. He had thought he would study religion, rituals, and so on and so forth. But he ended up studying three dimensions of stratification: class, status, and power. And what is more, he started seeing the differences in terms of convergence or correspondence, as he says, in the sense that they were not corresponding the manner in which they expected to correspond. So high was not happening. So there was lack of correspondence. And he expanded his class status and so on, caste status and so on, to a broader study of castes old and new, in which he made a very important contribution by way of commenting on backward classes, namely that under the impact, non-ritualistic, non-religious situation was changing, and the route of Sanskritization was not the route that was being taken for their upward mobility. Now, later, his interests expanded to inequality and equality. I don't have time to go into that fully, but what we know is that he was clear, and has been clear all through, that it will be futile to expect a completely egalitarian society to come, and for reasons that he has gone into. What we can expect is to create conditions in which opportunities are made available, and thereby reduce inequality. But to eliminate inequality is something that he feels is not a very realistic target. And with this, I think I would very quickly shift to his comparative method, and I will also not go into too many details. He has been devoted to comparative method. I've already outlined briefly some of his sources and some of the concerns he has. Other interests that he has, I call them new interests. If social stratification, inequality, these are his older concerns, I think some of his newer concerns, his writings on institutions, civil society, social mobilization, backward classes, university, ideology, intellectual, and so on, I would tentatively propose that these are all areas which fall under the general category of building a democratic society in India. Now, how does one build a democratic constitutional society in India? I think all these concerns are directed towards that, with social mobilization and his concern about backward classes providing an intersection between stratification, older concern, and newer concern, namely building a democratic society. But this is an idea which I am working on. I have not fully explored this, but this is something that has struck me. I am running out of time. I must now quickly omit a few details and go to my concluding comments. I have, for several decades, enjoyed my friendship with Béteille, personally André. And as I said, with his visits to Calcutta becoming less and less, visiting him in Delhi, and through those visits, meeting his family, especially his wife, Aisha Béteille, who has unfailingly been kind and generous to me. And I must say, I value this friendship greatly. When I forget this friendship and having revisited his articles, I'm full of his articles and books at the moment, because ever since you invited me, I have been looking for all books and reading them, revisiting, as I said, literally finding out where on my shelf which book is to be found and reading them up. As I have been revisiting them, I've asked myself, ignored my friendship, and asked myself, what do you think of this man whom I have known closely as a friend and also as a scholar through reading him and actually through those spoken words in his interviews? Because, as I said, my main texts were his spoken words in his interviews, including his interview with me. I must say, three things strike me about him: sensible, competent, and committed. Sensible, he is not given to excesses in his scholarly work or as an individual, as a person. He avoids extremes and actually a fairly sober person in that respect. A very sensible person who is not easily agitated and 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 instinctively dislikes extreme positions. Competent, I don't have to comment on that, except that we should not overlook his competence as a teacher. We talk about him as a scholar, but an exceptionally competent teacher. As far as his commitment is concerned, I would fully endorse what Ramchandra Guha has talked about him by way of commitment, that in his own quiet, undemonstrative manner, he has displayed exceptional commitment. His commitment to his scholarly vocation, to his own institution, the Delhi School of Economics, with which he stayed for till his retirement and even thereafter, and a commitment to the finest values of the society in which he was born. I completely endorse that, and I think Ramchandra Guha has put it very well. Having said it, I must also say that the greatest respect we can show to a scholar, the greatest respect we can show to a scholar is through engagement and serious engagement, honest engagement. And second, through looking at the scholar and asking, what is the way forward? Building on particular scholar's strength as well as weakness. here one has to put aside personal adulation and be as honest as possible. I would like to carry on with this, and I have you to blame for getting me dragged into this, Anand. I would like to carry on and complete this lecture uh, beyond this particular lecture by trying to see something that I have not presented here, how we look at him, his contribution, academic contribution, and how we can build upon it, how we can take it forward, building both on his strong points as well as on weak points. So, in short, what do we do next? And this is a task I have put before myself, and I do hope and pray that I shall be able to pursue it. Once again, thank you for this opportunity to address all of you. Thank you for taking me back to him. Your invitation came as a pleasant surprise, and I gave it all the seriousness. It came from you, and it came about a person, as you now know, I hold in high esteem. And I thank you for starting me on a journey which has not ended with these spoken words here in this lecture. Thank you again.
Thank you so much for your many-sided deep journey, and how significant that you yourself have used the word pray more than once. And that is something, it is also an invitation to realize an unspoken transcendence with Béteille. Professor Béteille writes that, building on Max Weber, he says that I am religiously unmusical. But he says there has not been a time where I have heard the song Ave Maria and tears has not flowed into my eyes. And therefore, so important that your invocation of prayer as a mode of being, and along with many other dimensions, literature, for example. So Béteille is a very fine craftsman in that sense of, and his journey with the literary, and even in his structural approach, his structuralism, it seems that initially he became too constrained within a structural. Therefore, the literary did kind of got inhibited, but in his later works, the literary also comes flowing, and many things. So thank you with our heart for your deep journey, and as you challenge us, the challenge us for each to be a practitioner of a co-worker, of a co-learner, and it is very easy to make adulation, but praise and praise. But the challenge before us is to be a co-learner, to be able to raise some questions which would really hold our hands and take it forward. So thank you with our heart. So now I invite friends and our participants to kindly share their thoughts and reflections. Those who would like to say, you can kindly raise your hand. So immediately let me begin. Some friends I see. Professor Sanjay Singh, please. Professor Singh. Okay, Professor Singh is taking some time. Professor Purnima, join, please. Please unmute yourself. Professor Purnima, join. Okay, it's taking some time. Dr. Mahakud, please. Dr. N.K. Mahakud. So Soumya Dwivedi. Okay. Minoti, please.
Thank you, Anantavai. I'm really very grateful to Professor Munshi for this presentation. It was very deep, and I learned so many aspects of André Béteille. But as they said, no, I need to, assimilate these ideas and little more about it. So I don't have such any questions today. I'm looking forward to learn little more about that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm glad.
Yes. So Gyan-Luigi, please. Dr. Gyan-Luigi is a philosopher from Vienna.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Please. Thank you very much. It was really very interesting. I am reflecting on the very many aspects which you posed in your expressed in your brilliant essays. I would have a question. Are there or can it be spoken of an influence of a direct or also an indirect, partially direct or partially indirect influence of Ambedkar about the interpretation of the caste and the criticism of the caste system in the annihilation of caste on Béteille? And to which extent, if it can be spoken of this influence, to which extent has Ambedkar be relevant for the thesis of Béteille and for his research project also? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Indeed, that's a very good question, I must say. Can you hear me? Am I audible?
Yes. Thank you.
Ambedkar features in Béteille with respect to constitutional democracy. And he has made several times reference to Ambedkar's role in constitution making and also his speeches in the Constituent Assembly with respect to the Constitution of India, especially with respect to honoring Constitution as individuals, as citizens. And this has been something that he has taken very seriously. Namely, we must function as individuals, as citizens, and participate in a constitutional democratic society. This is something he has drawn from Ambedkar, and there is a direct link because he mentions Ambedkar and quotes him. But with respect to Ambedkar's influence on Béteille, how comprehensive that is, that can be something we can discuss. But all I would say for the time being is that Ambedkar is an important element in Béteille's thought. I hope I've made myself clear.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now I request all friends, participant, Dr. Jenna, I see. Professor Joyan, please. Yes.
Yeah, so it was really an excellent exposition, and he has educated all of us on André Béteille. I met André Béteille in sociological conference in Delhi, and today he revisited us. So I just wanted to know whether do you find any similarity between Max Weber and André Béteille's caste, class, and power, and caste status and power?
Yes, I think it's quite obvious. His very first book and subsequent writings in terms of correspondence along multiple dimensions of stratification or lack of correspondence along divergent lack of correspondence in multiple strands of or dimensions of stratification. That is something from Weber. That is quite clear, including the title of his very first book. But I am not aware. I have to look very seriously. Has there been, he has mentioned Weber here and there, but has there been a serious, sustained discussion of Weber? A, and B, what is intriguing, even after my personal acquaintance with him and after reading him and reading him again, what is intriguing for me is when he went to Tanjore as a young man, he was an extremely young person at that time. What gave him the idea about caste and status and power? It couldn't have come from Nirmal Bose. It couldn't have come from Srinivas. It couldn't have come from his brilliant Marxist friends. So in short, how did he discover Weber and how did he use him? This is something intriguing. The simple answer is he discovered it himself, because surely I don't expect Srinivas to have done that, or for that matter, Radcliffe Brown and his Oxford anthropologist. So the one answer is he discovered it himself, but it's intriguing. I would like to look into it in more detail. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And Professor John, you can open up your video. Professor Munshi can see you.
So
And,
you have to.
no, you can do it yourself.
Yeah.
So,
Good evening, sir.
and Professor Munshi studied in Institute of Social Sciences, Agra.
Oh, I've also studied from that institute.
Is that so?
Yeah.
Was Brijraj Chauhan still there when you studied?
No, he left that time.
I was a student of, I have written a small piece on my days in Agra.
Oh.
When Brijraj Chauhan and others were there. Actually, let me tell you a story. I met Pavan Srinivas many years ago in Singapore through a common German friend. And when he heard that I had studied in Agra, he looked upon me and said, "Why didn't you study in Delhi?" I said, "I'm happy I went to Agra and not to Delhi, because if I had gone to stayed in Delhi, I would have only learned one kind of anthropology, Srinivas. But when I went to Agra, I learned different kinds of sociology." You can imagine, he was not happy with that reply.
So I joined institute in 76 and topped it there. I received gold medal over there.
Very good. I'm glad to hear that. What are you doing now?
I'm retired Professor Emeritus in the Alvag Educational Institute. It is deemed to be university. I was dean thrice and heading the department for 30 years.
I'm glad to meet you. I would like to
sir.
meet you. I am glad to meet you. Yeah,
so
please
I would
ask
like
me
to invite
question.
you to Agra again.
What is your question?
I just ask you what actually I had a number of questions. First, the trilogy between Durkheim and Durkheim, Srinivas and Béteille. You have said that Béteille was indirectly affected by Durkheim. And what influenced more, whether the French tradition or the Indian tradition on Béteille's writings?
Can I answer?
Yeah.
You see, as far as I'm concerned, even though Béteille had French father and he speaks French, I think he's principally influenced by British anthropology. And Durkheim comes to him through Radcliffe Brown.
Yeah.
My assessment. I am not saying that he has not taken Durkheim seriously in a direct fashion, but Béteille is Srinivas and Srinivas is British anthropology.
Yeah.
I think, and as far as Weber is concerned, that's a strange card in the whole pack. And as I said, where did he appear in all this? That's an intriguing question. And I think he discovered it perhaps himself. That's the most charitable. When I meet him next, I'll ask him.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Nice meeting you, sir.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Now, Randhir, please. And I, at the same time, request those present, Nisa, Soumya, Dr. Mahakut, if you have some thought, please, you are welcome to share briefly. Now, Randhir, please.
Thank you, Professor Munsi. It was really a very deep presentation. I can remember and I can recall when first time I met Professor André Béteille in Patna. He was conducting a seminar on the topic titled Sociological Reasoning. Sociological Reasoning. And there he emphasized on the idea of social anthropology, the kind of marginalization, sociology, particularly social anthropology is facing. And he raised some serious methodological issues, particularly related to maintaining a kind of epistemological trust while conducting anthropological or ethnographical studies. I think that is something which we need to discuss, because the kind of methodology, the kind of ignorance of cultural relativity that we are facing in today's research is something which is inviting quest for. My question, is why social anthropology, which is a kind of balance understanding of anthropology and sociology, cannot flourish as a school or as a department, despite having a kind of living leadership like Professor André Béteille. Thank you.
Thank you. You have asked in one question several questions. So let me answer one by one. You see, let us accept one thing, that ethnographic fieldwork originated out of a need for understanding alien societies, and by reasonable chance, underdeveloped, actually primitive societies. So very often it was associated with the requirements of colonial administration. Now, in a situation like this, if you, as an anthropologist, go and come from a superior, in double quotes, culture, and you go and study, in double quotes, an inferior culture, you look upon yourself as an advanced culture, and you are studying a primitive culture, the relationship part of, apart from conceptual problems of studying in this framework, the relational problem is, how are you as an analyst going to relate with those whom you are going to observe and analyze? Now, that creates a very important issue. Now, if you look upon them as informers, and if you look upon them as inferior, your relationship to them is going to be of a different kind, compared to if you look upon people as equal and partners. And I think we have to understand that when I do an ethnographic study among people of a particular kind, I have, first of all, reasons to be grateful for these people allowing me to study them. I have reasons to be, a lot of talk has been there about how privacy is compromised for a researcher when he or she is studying a particular tribe or a village or a community. But kindly put it the other way around. How much privacy is invaded by this inquisitive person who is going around with a notebook in hand, asking questions and trying to find out details about private and public life for reasons which are not clear to people who are being subjected to this study. What are they going to get out of it? And how much of their privacy is getting invaded? I think we need to develop tremendous sensitivity on this and actually feel very, very grateful for being allowed entry in double quotes into a field by people who habitate this field and actually for their hospitality. That's one answer. The other is in India today, we equate, for good or bad reasons, sociology and social anthropology in many ways. André Béteille is a very good example of this, and so is M.N. Srinivas. If you look at M.N. Srinivas's background, and if you look at Béteille's background, and ask yourself, these are the two people who are founding fathers, so to speak, of Delhi School of Economics Department of Sociology. And they were the people who were creating a department which became very famous, of sociology. There are good reasons for not seeing the difference too sharply between anthropology and sociology, but there are issues which need to be addressed, and I don't think we have addressed them adequately. I hope I have answered your questions. Have I?
Thank you so much. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you. Now, also at this juncture, one related submission is that Professor Béteille also wrote an autobiographical reflection on his work in Annual Review of Anthropology. And you might know that almost every year they carry a note from a noted practitioner of the field. It has contained Edmund Leach and others, And in another place, Professor Béteille himself says that how his move from anthropology to sociology was not innocent. In a way, he was kind of guided by a quote-unquote an evolutionary view that the subjects that anthropologists study, like the tribal society and others, they do not carry that much weight in the modern world. And Professor Béteille is honestly writing about it. And he's also saying that, when I'm talking to people like Sukhama and others, I see that I'm losing out on the intellectual front. And therefore, Professor Béteille's anthropology has to be looked at, not just from a methodological point of view, but the substantive, his own substantive decline in anthropological engagement in that sense that, how does one envision Professor Béteille, for example, doing fieldwork among tribal communities? And he himself says that I am not a great admirer of fieldwork. He says himself, he says that fieldwork does not come to me that, And but as we cultivate very quickly, dear friends, other friends co-present, Soumya and Dr. Mahakul, if you have some thought, please you are welcome. If not, with respect, I just want to bring one or two related thoughts is that among his influences, Nehru also plays a very important role. And he writes, and in a way, Ramachandra Guha, and who, if Béteille does not like excessives, Ramachandra Guha, he enjoys putting things in the most excessive tone. Like, in his reflection, he says, the wisest man in India is André Béteille. And now, because if you tell somebody as the wisest, including his patriot, and he's telling somebody as the most liberal. Now, the limits of things like this, and Goa is presenting himself as a Nehruvian Gandhian. But back to Professor Béteille is that Nehru also plays a very important role.
Yes, yes, it does.
And and Béteille's worldview, and
Yeah.
in a way, even if if you read his autobiography, Béteille has a very nuanced critique of his mother.
Indeed, I didn't mention all this because I was confining myself to the sources that I was consulting, and basically these interviews. But you're quite right. We have to, if you have to be interested, engaged in a comprehensive understanding about his intellectual upbringing, then Nehru plays an important role, and this is something very significant. Uh, perhaps more than Gandhi.
And my point is that his nuanced critique of Gandhi mother, his nuanced critique of his mother, is also a kind of unconscious critique of Gandhi. Because what Gandhi does, Gandhi takes his mother away from the comfort of the home, and if you do a kind of an unconscious study, because the kind his home is getting challenged. You refer to the tension between his mother and father. And who brings that tension? Gandhi brings that tension.
Listen, but not only Gandhi. You have to remember his mother became very champions of both Gandhi and Nehru. Also Nehru. Because I checked and cross-checked. I was surprised because frankly, I had expected it to be Tagore and Gandhi because of his mother's Bengali background. That it would be, I had expected it would be Tagore and Gandhi. Gandhi had become pan-Indian and Tagore. But I rechecked and found she did talk, it seems, by the manner in which Béteille is reporting, also Nehru. So Nehru became a presence to young Béteille through his mother for good or bad reasons.
And Béteille's, Béteille's project, in a way, is a modernistic project, because his conception of sociology, if you look at that, sociology is very modernistic, and the modernistic telos, and that way, that also has a link not only to the European.
Anand, I can't hear you, and I want to hear you properly.
Okay,
Kindly.
so Béteille's sociology, his whole journey has a modernistic project, and he's not critical of modernity, and he writes very clearly, and 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 the kind of questions that we need to pose to Béteille is also along these lines, that okay, he says that I cannot be disingenuine, I cannot be ingenuous, I cannot be honest if I become a critic of modernity. But one can be in the modern world, at the same time be critical of it. But his kind of modernistic telos also has a root in Nehru, and the kind of self. But what Nehru also had, he also had a spiritual dimension, and that is not explored enough, and that therefore the kind of unspoken transcendence that I am discovering with your reference to prayer is that the spiritual dimension of Nehru, it comes very alive in the foreword Nehru is writing to Tagore's centenary volume in 1961. And once we read that foreword, we see how deeply spiritual Nehru is. Similarly, one could feel that a kind of unspoken spirituality of Béteille, beyond himself, and his concern for the sense of civility, for example, his notion of civility, though he makes a contrast between civil society and good society. But another dimension quickly, you referred to Tocqueville. In fact, Alan Macfarlane also has a very important interview with Béteille, Alan Macfarlane from Cambridge. And Alan Macfarlane, in his essay, in the book Ramachandra Guha and Jonathan Perry have edited, he very insightfully says that it is Alexis de Tocqueville which kind of provides a frame for Béteille, because the kind of transition that Tocqueville was exploring as a student, though he came from an aristocratic background, he was not too tied to that. So therefore, another source of inspiration is Tocqueville. And finally, in that interview with Alan Macfarlane, Béteille makes a very interesting comment.
Sorry to interrupt. Macfarlane has been included in my study. When
Yes.
I mention Macfarlane
Yes.
is one of the interviews that I have included. Cambridge interview.
Yes, yes. And but I am also just linking his essay where he's emphasizing Alexis de Tocqueville's influence on Béteille. And I just and in that Cambridge interview, Béteille also is making a very insightful comment about India and China. And, and that is so insightfully Béteille. He's saying that, okay, you see China, they have a centralized polity of 5,000 years. India didn't have, but India has so many religions. So these are just a few linking thoughts that I
Thank
want.
you, Anand. Very useful. Very, very useful. And actually, what you said about spirituality of Nehru and Béteille is something worth probing further. I mean, this is something very interesting, I must say.
It has been an enriching evening, and now I invite Minati to hold our hands and make some concluding.
Thank you, Anantbhai. In between, actually, I was tempted to ask one question after listening to the discussion, as it is getting late, so I will just let it be for the next some other session.
Please ask,
No.
Another 2 minutes, Professor Munsik is generous,
No, that was very general question, as André Béteille's research was there on South Indian caste system in Sripuram. I wanted to just know, did he find any difference between the caste system between the south and north? So that one only just I wanted to ask. As my turn had gone, so it is a.
Should I give a quick answer?
Yes, please.
Yeah, please.
Very briefly, he has talked about his experience in Tanjore, and he has said his experience, very interesting. He came from Calcutta and he came from Delhi. You have to remember, this young man goes to Tanjore village and wants to study the caste system and all that. What is his background? He comes from Calcutta, where he has very intelligent Marxist friends, and he goes to Delhi and he's teaches in Delhi School of Economics, and then he goes to Tanjore. Now, obviously, when he compares his background in Calcutta, in Delhi, the caste system in Tanjore is going to be more strict and more orthodox. That is obviously clear. So that is one point. But you have to understand that while he is doing it, when he watches the women, widows, observing very strict rules, he is reminded of his grandmother, maternal. How there is a parallel between his maternal grandmother, who was quite a character and a presence. How her behavior, who was a widow, living in Chandranagar, and how Brahmin widow, living in Chandranagar, and how Brahmin widow, living in Chandranagar, and how her behavior, who was a widow, living in Chandranagar, and how Brahmin 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 widow, living in Chandranagar, and how Br and how these women in Tanjore, these widows, they behaved. He's seeing comparison between them. So it's he was greatly struck by the comparison between his grandmother and the widows of Tanjore.
Thank you. And why shall we close now? Say the vote of thanks.
Yes.
Thank you. I am Minati Pradhan on behalf of Sadhya Chakra and the Vishnu Center for Asian Blossoming. Would like to thank our today's chief speaker, Professor Surendra Munshi, for his deep presentation. At least for me, it was a new realm to understand it little bit well. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for your presentation. I also would like to thank Professor Gyan Luigi, Professor Purnima Jain, Professor Sanjay Singh, Dr. N. Mahakur, Soumya, the people who were present with us in our Zoom platform, and the people who have joined us in our Facebook platform also. Please pardon me if I have forgotten anybody's name, but I thank you all. Thanks.
Thank you very much.